So, thank you. I'm NovySan. My name is Dan Novy, but I spent some time in Japan. Back in 1991, I was a kabuki actor in Japan. Toured the world doing kabuki. Of course, the name just sort of stuck as a nickname. It became my Burning Man nickname. And when I got to MIT, there were 3 Dans in my research group. So it's just easier to use the nickname. All right, so after being a theater major, I got really into something called VR in 1993, and I decided I wanted to do the Waiting for Godot, the only production of Waiting for Godot in VR. In 1993, 95, this was impossible. You couldn't do it, couldn't get an audience in, couldn't push the polygons, but in learning how to do that, I taught myself how to do 3D modeling, texturing, animation, that kind of thing. So I went to Hollywood and I ended up working in the film industry as a visual effects technical supervisor for 20 years. And so after that, I was getting a little bored of that, being in Hollywood, and there's a magic spot here, isn't there? Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna have you do it. There you go. Why break the flow, right? And I'm only doing this intro because I didn't get to do the icebreaker thing here because I wasn't here. So I'm like, you're going to be like, who is this guy? He's just been like hanging around all day. So I went to MIT and I got a master's degree and a PhD. And I was trying to figure out like, how do I put together like visual effects and filmmaking and theater? I was missing the immediacy of theater. And I created something called programmable synthetic hallucination, which is essentially putting a transcranial magnetic brain stimulator that I built on your visual cortex and writing information into your visual field. So essentially I could write a pixel of light into your visual field. I could make it move left, right, up, and down. So it's a single pixel display with 2 degrees of freedom, but I proved I could do it. So that's, that's enough for the PhD. So, but while I was there, I actually was one of the first student participants of the MIT Media Lab Space Exploration Initiative. So some of you might know Sheena Gifford. She's one of the high seas analog astronauts. The tall gentleman in the back is Jeff Hoffman. He repaired the Hubble telescope. He still looks weird without his mustache. Katie Coleman, of course, she played the first duet from space. She brought her flute to space. She played a Jethro Tull duet with someone on the ground. It's amazing. Leland Melvin, he's most famous for having his 2 dogs in his official NASA. The story behind how he got that to happen, he literally snuck them onto the Air Force Base in the back of the truck under a thing. And yeah, it was great. It's a great story. And of course, Ariel Ekbaugh, who's the founder of the space exploration, Joey Ito, who was the director of the Media Lab at the time, and mine. So I've done the Zero G Games workshop at several Beyond the Cradles. That's sort of our annual space exploration conference at the Media Lab. And I have lots of projects. One involves exposing brewing yeast to cosmic radiation on the outside of the ISS and then bringing it back and making space beer. Because most people won't get to go to space. But if you're drinking something, you're tasting something, or eating bread that you know could only have existed because of space, it puts space in your mind. It brings it to the forefront and makes you think about space. And that's what we need. Lots of people thinking about space, because a lot of us are not going to get to go. Yes. And that was a thing that I came to. I said, I probably will never get to go to space. I'm 54 years old. They're not going to take me in the astronaut corps, but I can go to sea. And I was tired of thinking about neuroscience. So I did my postdoc with the Open Ocean Initiative. Here I am in Alaska with National Geographic, putting down drop camera systems. Next slide. And so I do actually build hardware. So this is a Raspberry Pi based camera system. So for under $1,000, I can give you 2,000 meters. I can give you HD video at 2,000 meters for under, and at scale, if we actually start making lots and lots of them, we can get that down to about $300. So at that point, we're not building giant monolithic systems, giant ROVs, millions of dollars. We're doing $300 Raspberry Pi cameras, with the depth and temperature and CTD sensors, all sorts of sensors, and we can start just giving them to Girl Scout troops. We can start giving them to Sea Scouts. We can try giving them to community members. We can do all that kind of stuff. So these are some of the hardware things that I've built with the Ocean Discovery League. And next. But what are we here for? We're here for games. We're going to be game designers. So I love game design because it is a thing that anyone can do. All human beings make up games. We do it naturally, right? And Seymour Papert at the Media Lab said, we have this idea. It's game design is something that is low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. So you don't have to be an expert. The floor to get in is really low, and there's lots of room to grow. And the wide walls means anyone can be involved in doing it, right? So this is a way for people who don't have like true, like what do I know about space exploration? And what do I do in the space industry? Well, if you want to make games about space, this is an easy way to sort of get into and doing it. It's very, very sort of like natural for people to do it. So August 27th, 2010, there's a collapse in Chile. Their miners are trapped. They basically, the first thing they do is they drill a small hole this big, and they realize it's going to be weeks for them to get them out. And when the thing they do after sending down, food and water, they sent down board games, right? They knew they were going to be isolated. And those of you who have done, analog missions, you're locked in there in a very tight space with the same people over and over, right? And they know that that mental edge is so important. And games are one of the things that can actually take up a lot of that sort of mental health burden. So NASA basically said, yeah, we're gonna treat this almost like an analog and get some data out of it. So they actually do games on the ISS. Chris Hadfield has he's retrofitted an entire Scrabble step, so he can put Velcro on the board, and they stick the board up right over where they eat their dinner. And each tile, the Scrabble tile, each one has Velcro on it. And so they're sitting there doing this. And at some point, he noticed that like nobody was getting like really good scores. The scores had gone down, and they said, wait, the X is missing. The X, and if you lose anything on the space station, you go and check the air filter. And sure enough, the X had sort of like floated down and landed up in the air filter, and they got it back, and people were then scoring really well again. So wait till it turns up in the air filter. But then there's also this game that they teach to new astronauts when they get up there. So there's this game where they'll squeeze out a blob of water. Surface tension is just making it do its thing. And then they've got these M&Ms. They throw the M&M. You have to throw the M&M into the thing of water, and then you have to eat it Pac-Man style. You can't use your hands, right? You've got to be like, oh. And there's some great video of Leland and Melvin learning this game. So they teach games. They've created games. They teach them to, just the way you sort of learn games on the playground, the astronauts do the same thing on the ISS. They do these space darts games. So this is literally space junk. It's garbage that would normally go in a capsule and get burned up. But Chris was sort of like figuring out, well, I've got these sort of things I can make fins out of. I've got some gaff tape, got to have gaff tape. And they made these sort of Velcro things that were like darts that you could like throw through, through the habitat there. Next one. And this also one, which is basically these sort of like spinning duct tape, kind of like shuriken, where they throw them and they sort of get them to stick. So lots of throwing games, and that'll be important when we talk about it. So, but what is a game? Like, what really is a game? Have you ever stopped and thought about how games are not only made, but what constitutes a game, right? All right, so there are 3 things that make a game, and you can deconstruct any game into the mechanics, the dynamics, and the aesthetics. And this is a fancy way of saying the things you do, the strategies and ways of playing that arise from the things you do, and the emotions, the joy, the agony of defeat, all the things that you sort of play. So designers start working in mechanics and work this way. Players play the game for this, and they actually start thinking about this before they start doing this. So there's this weird sort of like double highway where people are moving, where the designer and the players are sort of meeting in that. And so, yes, so mechanics, like let's talk about checkers. Like the mechanics of checkers are, you can only move diagonally. You have little pucks. You can only move diagonally. You can only attack by jumping over once. You can't move backwards until you get to the end. And then you get kinged. In fact, that's the only sort of abstract part of checkers. Checkers is like an extremely pure mechanical game, except we call it kinging. So like chess, you have kings and queens and rooks and things. So there's all this like heavy narrative content that kind of goes on top of it. But all you're doing is basically jumping. You're moving or jumping. That's the mechanic. And yet think about like awesome check where you're sort of like figuring out, oh, if I go that way, that way, that way, I'm engineering one of those double jumps, right? Or I finally get kinged and I do that massive you know, that big tour around the board, right? And you stand up and do the big like thing. Do you know what this is called when we do this? It's called fiero. And every culture does it. In fact, not just cultures, chimpanzees do it too. Most mammals have a version of something when they get so on fire, which is why it's called fiero, because they just went, yes, I did it. Or the board flip is the opposite of that, right? So that's the aesthetics that come from, you know, the dynamics that come from a simple mechanic of this is all we're doing. And it creates these moments of like pure joy. Yep, again, so things, mechanics are things like points, levels, leaderboards, badges, missions, you know, what's the pacing? These are the dynamics. Like, what are the rewards I get? Expanding quest lines, leveling up in Dungeons and Dragons, right? The mechanics of D&D is very interesting because it just happens in your mind and you're rolling dice, but then it's all about, oh, if I can get that, no, more spell slots, right? I got to level up so I can do that. And then it's the feeling of having played well is really what you're going for. But then we can classify games as well. And this is like super important when we start talking about physical games. So mimicry is just imitation, simulation, role play. That's a thing. My favorite is Ilinx. Ilinx. It's hard to say. It's a Greek word. Remember when you were on the playground and you would close your eyes and spin around and then stop suddenly? That's a game. That's a feeling, you know, vertigo that you're dosing in yourself and you're having this sort of like very embodied kind of thing. Agon, right? That's competition. That's most of the games we think about. The agony of defeat. That's agon is the word. And then Alia, games of chance. So, you know, you're rolling dice, you're digging cards, you're, you know, so like poker, it's like a nice sort of mix between those. Yeah, and then some bluffing, which would be simulation. So there's lots in there. And then it's sort of like a spectrum, like Ludus is very rule-based versus, you know, Heda, which is the free-form improv. So like LARPing is over here. D&D is kind of over here because there are a lot of rules, but like chess, way over here, real rule-based. So, but all again, totally, you know, like leading to that moment of pure joy. Okay, this is where we're going to do things. So break into groups of 3 or 4. Kind of grab just you 4 and you 4 and you 4 and you 3 and you 2 and you 5. No, you 3 and you 4. Yep. This is emergent. Go just make a little group here. If you want to grab, you know, one of these, we got lots and lots of markers in here. There's some dice in here. There's some tape in here. Well, that's what I don't know, because what you're going to do is you're going to create a version of tic-tac-toe. This is a warm-up round. I'm going to stretch your mental muscle. We're going to take tic-tac-toe. Who does not know the rules of tic-tac-toe? When's the last time any of you played tic-tac-toe? Long ago, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to create a version of tic-tac-toe that works for 3 players. 3 players instead of 2. You can make any kind of change you want. Any change. You can change the board, you can change the markers, you can change the dimensionality, you can change anything you want, right? I know that's freedom is a double-edged sword. You're like, oh God, he's letting me do anything. How am I supposed to do anything that way? It's just like my mind is blanking. So think about how the normal mechanics of the game, what mechanic are you going to change that is going to allow 3 people to play? And then I want you to play test it. So just sort of start spitballing, just start pie in the sky, throwing out ideas, saying, you know what I've always hated about tic-tac-toe, and change that, right? That's a good thing. So, and there's no limit here. You can do anything. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. 5 minutes, discuss it yourself, and then we're going to figure out who's got a fun game. Cue the Jeopardy theme. Doom, 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 doom. Awesome. There are some dice up here if you want to sort of add randomization to tic-tac-toe. And when you start to converge on one that you're like, play test it. Play test it, play test it, play test it. The key to game design is play testing. Is it actually fun? 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. Play test. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Woo! Pencils down. Okay. Okay. Oh, they're having so much fun over there. I don't want to stop them. Oh, maybe I'll just let it go a little bit. They are deeply, deeply engrossed here. I'm liking this. All right. All right. So who basically just added an extra row and an extra set of characters, right? Okay. What happens in that game? What happens when you just basically add more? You get blocked and it takes forever to finish, right? So like that's sort of like easy, like, oh, I'm just going to add an extra dimension, like, and really even just one more thing and an extra character for the third person. That doesn't actually lead to a more fun game. In fact, it makes a tedious game that goes on longer. Oh, okay. So tell me about the scoring. What did you add?
Okay, we added we had the 16 grid. The first person to get 3 in a row will get 3 points. The second person will get 2 points, and the third person will get a point. If you happen to have 4 in a row, horizontal, diagonal, or vertical, you get double points.
So they added a scoring mechanism to it, that sort of a graduated scoring mechanism, right? Because otherwise that you'll just be like putting things, and so now there was a dynamic that arose where you start to say, well, I could still get 2 points if I go for this. Do I go for the big win, right? Do I go for 4 in a row? Do I go for 3? Do I do a 3 and a 2? So yeah, so what did you all come up with? There was a lot of giggling over here.
Okay, so we realized that, we wanted to multiply the number, right? If there's more people, then we should create more squares, right? So that was the first instance. The second instance is that we wanted to do either a three-peat. So if you get 3, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, right, you win, right? But it's tallied points. So every time that you get 3 in a row, that's a point for your team, for your person, right? But the only way to create a fatality or like, checkmate is to get a 4 or 5 roll, right? So you get all 4 in there. But also you got some
Oh, so adding randomization to tic-tac-toe. Yes.
Yeah, so we thought about if we could maybe change the order of who goes next. Maybe that would add some strategy into where you would place, or sabotage.
Random mechanic would lead to, oh, it was planned, you put it right where I put it.
Yes. Yes.
What'd you guys do back here?
Yeah, I could do it. We ended up going with a 6x6 board, also with like a tiered like system. We could go, 3, 4, 5 in a row, but one of the catches was that you can't intersect your rows. So if you can only reuse like your symbol if it's like at a corner, not as an intersection. So, and this was Isaac's doing here, and he actually won. So yeah. So,
Was it fun?
yeah.
All right. Did anyone change the shape of the board? What happened when you tried?
So we tried to do like some kind of like triangular board, and we're like, oh, this is Chinese checkers, right? And
I've had students actually go dimensional, so like full on 3D, 9 by 9, and then they started playing it in Blender. They actually got out their computers and started modeling it in the classroom. They're like, wait, I want to play this game and I want to figure out. I've had people do color changes where you're actually creating color gradients across your pieces. So you get 4 in a row, but you have to have like a perfect color gradient. So art suddenly becomes a very important part of it.
We have a very lazy and simple fix for that our game.
Which is?
So let's keep it exactly what it is, but let's change the rules. So we played XO, XO, XO. And then whoever got the first was the winner.
Oh, so if it lined up that you got that big win or you couldn't because you did, so you're switching off the actual periods. Okay.
We were a little slow, so we didn't have enough time to do enough play testing, but I think what would have happened with that is you're not trying to make a winning move because you know that it's just going to be the next person that's going to grab
And you can't. You're like, oh, this is so you. You
Yeah,
got
because
this.
It's like 6 turns ahead, right?
Right.
If I'm playing an X.
You're
my
like,
next turn is gonna
1,
be
2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
You know, so.
I heard something over here. You said, and this is where you have to make a choice point. And I was like, oh, okay, hold on.
Well, we decided to go with 3 different shapes. And then there's, and I wanted to observe because I had a theory. And so these 3 played, and the theory was, and that's where you hear that, I'm like, there's going to be and there's will inevitably be a point where a person has to decide if they're going to choose between winning or preventing someone else from losing. Because we decided that when one person wins 3 in a row, the other 2 people are still left to continue to see who wins next. So then you have to decide, okay, am I going to prevent this person from winning, or am I going to like go for it? So it was more, we were doing psychology stuff.
Exactly. That's what we do. Okay. All right. Oh,
Yeah, so we started with like you had 2 players on a 3x3, so we went with like n+1. So we tried the 4x4 grid at first, and we were trying for 4 in a row, and we kind of realized that that was not going to be possible. So we tried it again with just 3 in a row on the 4x4 grid, and that was really fun.
Tried 2 different ways of mechanics.
Yeah.
And one of them turned out to be way more fun because it gave rise to different dynamics. It gave you all sorts of ways, different ways of playing that were better than the brute force method, essentially. All right. Break it on. So at this point, I would normally say, okay, now we're going to make it happen in underwater, but I don't want to run out of time. So imagine you're going to try to do this in the neutral buoyancy tank in Houston. You're going to create a version of tic-tac-toe. That's a thought experiment for your own brain tonight while you're trying to sleep. Okay. So yes. And then here is, we talked about checkers, right? So this is like for 30 seconds, I want you to add some kind of narrative content to the game of checkers. You can change the mechanics of checkers. That's okay. But I want you to say, how can I redo checkers so that there's some kind of story element? There's some kind of, the way that chess has different named pieces. So 30 seconds, you don't have, yeah, in fact, yeah, in your groups, put your heads together. What can you do? What can you add to checkers to take it away from being a purely abstract mechanical game and actually put some kind of story element on it? 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Ten seconds. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Group in the back. How did you make checkers?
We like made it so every time you kill a piece, you stack another one of your pieces on it, so it's like more powerful.
So it's sort of like a self-limiting system. Every time you kill something, you have to give up a little bit more of your own power and the ability to do it again. Is that? Ah. Oh, so as they're stacking up, the piece becomes more powerful. I like that. That sounds like super fun. What'd you guys come up with?
Got to be hunt- We got as far as saying, well, maybe we could be hunters, but we're not sure. What are we hunting?
So everything's set up on a diagonal, right? I was thinking you've got a horizontal offset. You could have kind of like 2 games going at the same time, but they only interact with each other once somebody kings or something like that, right? Yeah, one game can impact the other or something.
How about you guys?
So Hannah suggested adding place so that it actually takes, so that you're actually acting it out, not just on an abstract board. And then Right, and then I suggested maybe, since we're in the biosphere, that maybe there could be different biomes on the board, and the rule and the mechanic might change slightly depending on which biome you were in. And then we started playing with the idea of a third color, and we didn't get very far with that, but
Didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. I love this idea of different biomes on the board or giving it some kind of geographical, it's like Game of Thrones, the checker game. Yeah. What you guys comment?
So we were thinking, I was pretty inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, where you could pick some sort of like backstory for why your army of checkers should win, which could have like benefits and scoring or something like that. But then when you hop a piece in some games of checkers, I don't know if it's a house rule or a general rule, you can like hop a piece and then hop a piece and then hop a piece. And we were thinking that you could like roll a dice to see your success rate with hopping that many pieces in a row. So if you roll like a 1, you can actually only hop one piece. But if you roll like a 15 and your opponent rolls a 2, you can hop a bunch more of their pieces if it's set up in that way.
Yeah, I like that. So extra mechanics, extra power. These guys are still talking about their idea. I can tell, I got to hear this.
So one thing that we talked about is alien invasion, right? And yeah, by the way, Martian combat training is tomorrow at 10 a.m. So we had a great day today. Come tomorrow. It's going to be lit. But what we wanted to really focus in on is creating commanders, right? And the commander has a special move and a special power that the rest of the team is not capable of unless they get to that next side, right? And so in checkers, if you move that one piece all the way to the end, it's able to move front and back, right? And do the double jump, right? But at the beginning of this game, the commanders get the opportunity to do that from the beginning. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I like that. I like that. All right. So that's really awesome. I want to play all those, right? I'm like in my brain, I'm like, oh, maybe tonight somebody will bring out checkerboard. So all right. All right. So for the rest of the time, how much time do we have left? 10 minutes? Or we have 10 minutes. Okay, we have 10 minutes and we're going to do this. The challenge is to create a game, very broadly defined, that takes advantage of the affordances of the International Space Station. So it's such things as microgravity, right? It could be anything. You could retrofit a board game. You could figure out a playground game. How would you play a certain, like, can you do Red Rover in 0G? How does that work? Rituals, sports, or something entirely new, something we've never, ever heard of. I did have a group of students, one conference, actually figure out how to play the game of Kidditch on the ISS. They said, what's the bludger? What's the, the thing, the spotters, all of them. They figured out exactly how to play this game. So for the next 10 minutes, until we're done, I want you all to create a game. And then at some point when you're done, and we're all out here, email me what the game is. So we don't have time to go through for each of them, even though I definitely want to hear your games. So figure out, are you going to retrofit? Are you going to create? What mechanics are you going to change? What dynamics will it lead to? Next slide, just things to think about. Mass, volume while playing, right? How is it going to be stored? Is it a big piece? How do they get it up there? Do you have tiny little pieces that could end up in the air thing? So these are sort of the constraints that you have as well. Katie Coleman says, if ground control knew how fast they move around when the cameras aren't on, they would make them wear helmets. They would make them wear helmets. Basically, they are pushing off as they're shooting through real fast. But the minute those cameras come on, they're all like, yeah. I personally want to do a laser maze. You imagine setting up a laser maze in one of the habs and basically being able to, just sort of, you've got, no gravity to start, you're just like twisting your body. So, all right. Retrofit a game, make a new game. Oh. Somebody's got to have done that. What are the mechanics of hide and seek that you can change? So basically you've got an extra dimension. So hiding could literally be you just going up to the ceiling, right? Yeah, like an assassin kind of, yeah. Or you blindfold the seeker. Do I have another slide? I don't- See if I have another slide. Ah, yeah, that's it. We can go backwards. That's fine. This is normally an hour to hour and a half workshop. So I'm like burning through. Yeah. Yeah. Remember, board games are flat because of gravity. And also, how do you roll a dice in microgravity? You can't. So how do you randomize if you need to randomize? Or, I mean, you could roll a dice, but how would you make it, you know, truly random? Okay, Mad Libs crossed with refrigerator magnets. So you got big refrigerator magnet words, and then you have to launch your body through space and try to get the word into the Mad Lib thing with your. That we have a game called Tetris, ISS, and basically you have two teams, and the opponent team throws you one of the pieces, the 4x4. You push off, and you can't basically. All you can do is twist your body, and you get a piece from the opponent's team, and you have to be like and stick it against the back wall. Yeah, Tetris. That was the very first game that was. Or so you do this, you're adding a bunch of energy. It could do that. So it's a very different set of movements. Yeah. Right? Oh yeah, billiards and Jenga together. You sort of like see if you can smack a piece out. All right, again, so we're not going to report out, but if you come up with a really cool game, just email me. Tell me what it is. I would love to hear it. I'm waiting for them to, I'll give you my email address during arcade night. It's just novysan@unl.edu or novysan@mit.edu or novysan@gmail.com. Any of those, the email will get to me. And if you would like to steal this workshop for all the kids that you represent, open source. This is an open source workshop. So how many of you in this room are game designers? That's right. You have all designed games now. Put it on your special skills section of your resume. Good job. All right, thanks everyone. That was super fun. I loved it.